The day my wife returned from vacation, I thought I was welcoming her home. I had no idea I was opening the door to a betrayal so devastating that it would change my life forever. My name is Nathan Carter. I was 39 years old, and I owned a commercial real estate development company based in Chicago. My company designed and built office complexes, luxury apartment communities, and mixed-use developments across several states. It had taken 13 exhausting years to earn a reputation people finally respected. Every completed building reminded me that patience could accomplish what shortcuts never could. Business was demanding, but it wasn't the center of my world. That place belonged to my wife, Emily Carter. We had been married for 9 years. People admired us because we never looked like a couple pretending to be happy. We genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Even after long work days, we always found time to eat dinner together. Sometimes we cooked. Sometimes we ordered food and talked for hours about everything except work. Those evenings reminded me why I had fallen in love with her. She made ordinary moments feel important. Like many couples, we dreamed about having children. We decorated a small bedroom that remained empty for years. Every birthday, we promised ourselves that maybe next year would finally be different. Hope became part of our routine. So did disappointment. Medical appointments slowly replaced weekend trips. Doctors recommended new treatments almost every few months. Some brought optimism. Most brought silence. Neither of us blamed the other. We simply carried the disappointment together. At least, I believed we did. As time passed, Emily became quieter. She smiled less often. She spent longer evenings sitting alone on our back patio, watching the lights from neighboring houses disappear one by one. I usually joined her. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Silence can be comforting when two people understand each other. One evening she finally spoke. "I think I need to leave for a while." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Just a vacation." She stared into the distance. "I need space to breathe. I feel like every day reminds me of something we've been unable to have." Her voice wasn't angry. It sounded exhausted. I reached for her hand. "If that's what you need, then you should go." She smiled for the first time in weeks. "You'd really be okay with that?" "Of course. I want you to come home happy." Over the next few days, I planned everything. A beautiful resort, oceanfront suite, business class flights, private transportation. She deserved more than another difficult year. The morning of her departure, I drove her to the airport before sunrise. She hugged me longer than usual. "I'll miss you. I'll miss you more." She laughed softly before disappearing through security. I stood there until she was completely out of sight. I had no reason not to trust her. She was my wife. The first several days passed peacefully. Emily sent photographs almost every evening. Crystal blue water, palm trees, beautiful sunsets. She looked relaxed. I was relieved. Maybe this trip was exactly what we both needed. Meanwhile, my company entered the final stage of negotiations for the largest project in our history. A pension investment group wanted us to develop an entire waterfront district. The project would secure work for hundreds of employees over several years. Only 4 people knew about the confidential agreement. My attorney, my chief financial officer, myself, and Emily. Absolute secrecy was essential. If competitors discovered the proposal before it was signed, the entire deal could collapse. Then strange things began happening. One subcontractor unexpectedly withdrew from the project. A competing developer submitted plans almost identical to ours. Private financial figures somehow reached people outside our negotiations. My legal team believed someone was leaking confidential information. I refused to believe it came from inside. Not yet. Late one evening, after another stressful meeting, I returned to an empty house. Everything felt strangely quiet. Emily had been gone for almost 3 weeks. I poured a cup of coffee and sat alone in the kitchen. Without realizing it, I picked up my phone. No message from Emily. Instead, I noticed a notification from an unknown number. There was no greeting, no explanation, only one photograph. I opened it. At first, I frowned. Then my heartbeat slowed. Emily stood on the deck of a luxury yacht. She wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man I had spent years trying to erase from my life. A man whose name I never expected to see again. Before I could process what I was looking at, another message appeared beneath the photograph. "She's not where she told you she was." I stared at the screen. Then my phone rang. The caller ID simply read, "Private number." The phone stopped ringing before I could answer. I immediately called the number back. Nothing. Only an automated message informed me that the caller could not be reached. I looked at the photograph again. Emily stood near the yacht's railing, smiling naturally. The man beside her wasn't a stranger. His name was Logan Pierce. 5 years earlier, Logan had been my business partner. We had built Carter Development Group together, before discovering that our values couldn't survive the same company. I believed in earning trust one project at a time. Logan believed every shortcut was acceptable if enough money waited at the finish line. Our partnership ended after I discovered he had secretly offered bribes to secure construction permits. I reported everything to our board. He resigned before the investigation became public. That day, he looked me in the eyes and said something I never forgot. "You'll regret choosing principles over profit." I never saw him again. Until now. What frightened me wasn't seeing Logan. It was seeing Emily beside him. Not frightened, not uncomfortable, relaxed. As though they had known each other far longer than I realized. I spent the entire night trying to convince myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe they had accidentally met during the vacation. Maybe the photograph had been taken out of context. Maybe someone wanted to destroy my marriage before the biggest project of my career. Every explanation felt possible. Every explanation also felt incomplete. The following morning, Emily called. Her voice sounded cheerful. "I wish you could see this sunrise." I closed my eyes. "I wish I could too." She laughed softly. "We'll come back here together someday." I almost asked about the photograph. Instead, I remained silent. If someone was manipulating us, I wanted facts before accusations. Love deserved at least that much. During the following week, our conversations became shorter. She always claimed to be tired. Sometimes she ended our calls after only a few minutes. Other times she ignored my messages for an entire day before apologizing. She blamed poor reception. I wanted to believe her. Yet every apology seemed carefully prepared. Meanwhile, my company faced unexpected problems. A confidential design proposal appeared inside a competitor's presentation. Private financial projections somehow reached outside investors. One supplier cancelled a signed agreement without explanation. Another suddenly doubled their prices after learning details that had never been publicly disclosed. Someone possessed information available only to my closest circle. My attorney suspected industrial espionage. Our cybersecurity team searched every computer. Nothing. Every employee agreed to cooperate. Nothing. The leaks continued. One afternoon, my chief financial officer entered my office carrying a folder. His expression immediately caught my attention. "I think you should see this." Inside were photographs taken during a meeting between one of our competitors and Logan Pierce. The meeting had occurred only 3 days earlier. The competitor later submitted construction plans almost identical to ours. Coincidence no longer felt believable. Still, there was no evidence connecting Emily. Only questions. More questions than answers. 3 days before Emily's scheduled return, another anonymous message reached my phone. This time it wasn't a photograph. It was a boarding confirmation. The departure airport wasn't located anywhere near the resort Emily had described during every phone call. It belonged to another island nearly 400 miles away. Someone had deliberately changed travel plans, without telling me. I contacted the resort directly. The receptionist politely searched the reservation. After several minutes, she apologized. "Mr. Carter, we have no guest registered under your wife's name." I felt my heartbeat slow. There must be a mistake. I booked the reservation myself. She checked again. Nothing. No Emily Carter. No reservation. No check-in. No record she had ever stayed there. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. If Emily had never been there, where had she spent the last several weeks? That evening she called again. She talked about the beach, the weather, the food. Everything sounded normal. Everything sounded rehearsed. I listened without interrupting. When she finally asked whether something was wrong, I answered with the biggest lie I had ever told my wife. No. After ending the call, I hired a private investigator. Not because I wanted our marriage to fail, because I desperately wanted someone to prove that mine was. 48 hours later, the investigator called. "I've located your wife." His voice carried no emotion. "Mr. Carter, I think you should prepare yourself." He sent me a secure file. Inside were airport records, hotel registrations, security photographs. Emily had never traveled alone. From the moment she landed, Logan Pierce had been waiting for her. And according to the timestamps, they had shared the same luxury villa for almost the entire vacation. The investigator ended his report with one sentence. "I believe this relationship began long before the trip." I stared at the screen until sunrise. Then, I heard the sound of a suitcase rolling across my driveway. Emily was home, but nothing about our marriage would ever be the same. I watched Emily walk toward the front door as though nothing had changed. She smiled the same way she always had after returning from a trip. She carried 2 shopping bags in one hand and rolled her suitcase with the other. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed she had simply returned from a peaceful vacation. I opened the door before she reached it. She wrapped her arms around me without hesitation. "I missed you." For a brief moment, I almost hugged her back. Instead, I stepped aside. "Come inside." She studied my face. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Long week." She accepted the answer. At least, she pretended to. For the next hour, she spoke non-stop about beaches, restaurants, sunsets, and people she had supposedly met during her trip. Every story sounded carefully rehearsed. Every detail had been polished. She even showed me photographs on her phone. None of them included Logan. None of them revealed the luxury villa. None of them explained why the resort where I had booked her stay had no record of her. She had prepared an entire vacation that never existed. And she delivered every lie while looking directly into my eyes. That hurt more than the affair itself. Because betrayal begins long before 2 people share a room. It begins the moment honesty becomes optional. That evening, after Emily went upstairs to unpack, I locked myself inside my home office. The investigator called again. "I've completed the financial review. What did you find?" "There were several large cash payments made during your wife's trip." "From who?" "A company owned by Logan Pierce." I remained silent. The investigator continued. "Mr. Carter, I don't believe the vacation was spontaneous. It appears someone financed every part of it." The room suddenly felt colder. Emily hadn't simply accepted another man's company. Someone had invested in the entire trip. That meant planning, preparation, purpose. Nothing about this had happened by accident. Before ending the call, the investigator sent another encrypted folder. Inside were surveillance photographs from the private marina. Emily and Logan weren't behaving like 2 people who had unexpectedly crossed paths. They looked comfortable, natural, like a couple that had already shared many moments together. One image stayed on my screen longer than the others. Logan held Emily's hand as they walked toward the yacht. She never tried to pull away. She never looked uncomfortable. She simply smiled. The same smile she once reserved for me. I closed the laptop. Not because I had seen enough, because I couldn't bear to look anymore. The following morning, I drove to the office earlier than usual. Work had always been my refuge. Not that day. My legal advisor was already waiting. He placed another confidential folder across my desk. "We've confirmed another information leak." My stomach tightened. "How bad?" "Our competitor submitted revised development plans. They include structural concepts that exist only in your private design files." Who had access? He looked down. The same 4 people. Me, my attorney, my chief financial officer, Emily. I leaned back without saying a word. Until that moment, I had separated my marriage from my business. Now the 2 disasters were beginning to merge. If Emily had shared confidential information with Logan, The consequences reached far beyond betrayal. Hundreds of employees depended on the project we were negotiating. Families depended on those salaries. Years of work could disappear because someone I trusted had chosen another side. Late that afternoon, Emily surprised me by visiting the office. She carried lunch from my favorite restaurant, something she hadn't done in months. I thought we could eat together. She smiled warmly. "You've been working too hard." Anyone watching would have believed we were the perfect couple. Even my receptionist whispered, "You two are relationship goals." If only she knew. Emily kissed my cheek before sitting across from me. Then she casually looked toward the confidential project folders stacked on my desk, only for a second. But I noticed. She immediately looked away. Too quickly. Almost as if she had caught herself. Small details reveal enormous truths. That evening, after we returned home, Emily fell asleep on the couch while watching television. Her phone rested beside her. For years I had never touched it without permission. Trust had made curiosity unnecessary. Tonight, trust no longer existed. The screen illuminated as a new message arrived. The sender's name wasn't saved, only a number. The preview contained 6 words. Did he suspect anything after today? My pulse accelerated. I picked up the phone. It unlocked. Another message appeared before I could read the previous conversation. "Don't worry, everything is still going according to plan." The reply was sent from Emily's phone, only seconds earlier. I stared at the words, not because they surprised me, because they confirmed my greatest fear. This wasn't simply an affair. They were working together, and whatever they had planned, it wasn't over yet. I didn't confront Emily that night. Anger would have given her time to prepare another lie. Instead, I placed her phone exactly where I had found it and walked upstairs as though nothing had happened. For the next several days, I became a man studying his own marriage from a distance. I noticed things I had ignored before. Emily smiled whenever she received certain messages. She carried her phone everywhere, even inside the house. She asked unusual questions about my company's future.
When do you think the waterfront project will be finalized?
How much would the company be worth afterward? If something happened to you, who would inherit everything? Each question sounded harmless. Together, they painted a disturbing picture. She wasn't asking as a wife. She was gathering information. I answered carefully. Never enough to satisfy her curiosity. Never enough to reveal that I already knew. Meanwhile, my private investigator continued following Logan Pierce. The reports arrived every evening. Most contained financial records, business meetings, and surveillance photographs. Then one report changed everything. Logan had scheduled a private appointment at an exclusive medical clinic. Emily entered through the same underground entrance less than 20 minutes later. They remained inside for almost 3 hours. When they finally left, Logan wrapped one arm around her shoulders while helping her into the car. The investigator couldn't hear their conversation. He didn't need to. The photograph said enough. 3 weeks later, Emily stood in front of the bathroom mirror much longer than usual. She looked nervous. Not frightened. Excited. That afternoon she asked whether we could have dinner together. "I have something important to tell you." Her voice sounded unusually gentle. I nodded. Of course. The restaurant overlooked Lake Michigan. It had been our favorite place since our second wedding anniversary. She insisted on reserving the same table beside the window. For several minutes we spoke about ordinary things. The weather, work, vacation. She laughed more than she had in months. Then she slowly reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "I've been carrying a secret." I remained silent. She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The restaurant suddenly felt silent. I looked into her eyes without saying a word. She smiled through tears. I found out shortly after I came home. According to Emily, this was supposed to be the happiest moment of our marriage. Instead, something inside me became perfectly calm. I remembered every fertility report, every specialist, every diagnosis, every conversation. Most importantly, I remembered the timeline. Her vacation had lasted 7 weeks. Long before she left, We had already been living separate lives inside the same house. Months had passed without intimacy, yet she looked at me with complete confidence. It's our miracle. She actually smiled while saying it. Our miracle. I slowly leaned back in my chair. Around us, couples laughed. Wine glasses clinked. Soft music filled the room. Nobody noticed that my marriage was collapsing in complete silence. Emily reached into her handbag and removed a folded ultrasound image. She pushed it toward me. I wanted you to be the first person to see. I looked down, then back at her. When exactly did you discover this? Just after I returned. And you're certain? She nodded immediately. Absolutely. For the first time that evening, I asked a question she hadn't prepared for. Would you be willing to take a DNA test after the baby is born? Her smile disappeared. Only for a second. Then it returned. Why would you even ask that? I just think it would remove every possible doubt. She stared at me. There shouldn't be any doubt. I agree. I kept my voice calm. So you won't mind. She withdrew her hand from mine. You're ruining what should have been a beautiful moment. No, I answered quietly. I'm protecting the truth. She looked genuinely offended. You don't believe me. I studied her face. I want evidence. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Emily stood up. People turned to look. Tears filled her eyes. I can't believe you'd accuse your own wife. She walked out before I could answer. The performance was flawless. Anyone watching would have believed I had just broken the heart of a faithful woman. I remained seated until she disappeared. Only then did I remove my phone. I opened the secure folder my investigator had sent earlier that afternoon. The newest photograph showed Emily and Logan leaving the private medical clinic. The timestamp matched the estimated stage of her pregnancy almost perfectly. There was no longer any room for coincidence. But another document inside the folder caught my attention. It wasn't a photograph. It was an invoice. The clinic had billed the appointment under a corporate account. The account holder wasn't Logan Pierce. It wasn't Emily. It belonged to one of my company's biggest competitors. The pregnancy, the information leaks, the failed development project. They were all connected, and I was finally beginning to understand that this had never been only about destroying my marriage. Someone was trying to destroy my entire life. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove around Chicago until midnight. The city lights reflected across the windshield, while one question repeated itself inside my head. Why? Why would Emily risk everything? An affair was one thing. Destroying my company was something else. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront either of them again. Not until every piece of the puzzle fit together. The next morning, my attorney, David Morrison, arranged an emergency meeting with a forensic accounting firm. For the next 10 days, specialists quietly examined every confidential document connected to our waterfront project. Email logs, financial transfers, access records, phone activity. Nothing was left untouched. The results were devastating. Nearly every confidential file stolen from my company had first been opened using Emily's secure login. She had never sent the documents directly. Instead, she photographed them with her phone whenever she visited my office. The metadata proved everything. Dates, locations, device identification. There was no room for doubt. Then another discovery changed the entire investigation. One of Logan's holding companies had secretly purchased nearly 12% of a rival development corporation. The same corporation that had won the contract after our proposal mysteriously collapsed. This had never been revenge. It had been business. Destroy my company. Steal the project. Profit from the collapse. Emily had simply become the easiest way inside. Yet one mystery remained. The baby. 3 weeks later, Emily's attorney requested a private settlement meeting. She refused to discuss divorce. Instead, she demanded financial protection for what she repeatedly called our child. When I entered the conference room, Emily was already seated. She looked confident, almost victorious. Logan wasn't there. Neither were reporters, only attorneys. exactly the way I wanted it. Emily slid a folder across the table. I don't want this to become ugly. I opened it. Inside was a proposed settlement. The figures made me laugh quietly. She wanted the house, a monthly support payment, a percentage of future company profits, and a trust fund for the baby. According to her attorney, accepting the agreement would prevent unnecessary publicity. I slowly closed the folder. Then I placed another envelope on the table. This is my final offer. Emily smiled. She assumed I had surrendered. Her attorney opened the envelope first. His expression disappeared almost immediately. Inside were surveillance photographs, airport records, hotel registrations, luxury villa invoices, marina security footage, financial transfers from Logan Pierce, copies of confidential company documents recovered from Emily's cloud storage. Every page carried official authentication. No assumptions, only evidence. Emily reached for the photographs. The color drained from her face. You hired someone to follow me? No. I remained perfectly calm. I hired someone to protect my company. Silence filled the room. Her attorney slowly removed his glasses. He looked toward Emily. You told me none of this existed. She couldn't answer. I continued speaking. You also told everyone your vacation was spent alone. I placed another document beside the photographs. The clinic invoice. Emily recognized it immediately. Her hands began trembling. This proves you and Logan visited the same medical clinic several weeks before you announced your pregnancy. She looked away. Her attorney stared at her. You never mentioned this. She whispered something too quietly to hear. Then she finally looked back at me. It's not what you think. I nodded. I know. It's worse. I removed one final document. A court order. She frowned. What is that? A judge approved prenatal DNA testing after reviewing the evidence of fraud surrounding this case. Her attorney grabbed the order before she could. He read every page carefully. Then he leaned toward Emily. His voice became almost inaudible. You told me the father wasn't in question. Emily started crying. Real tears this time. Not the performance I had seen before. Everything around her was collapsing. She finally admitted that Logan had convinced her the child would guarantee financial security. He promised marriage, luxury, a future without worry. He also promised that once my company collapsed, nobody would question the timing. She believed him. She believed everything. Then I asked the only question that still mattered. Where is Logan now? Emily closed her eyes. I don't know. Her attorney interrupted immediately. Actually, he opened another document recently delivered to his office. Mr. Pierce was arrested this morning. Everyone looked at him. He continued. The federal investigation involves commercial fraud, bribery, insider corruption, and conspiracy. The room became completely silent. Emily looked as though she had stopped breathing. Everything Logan had promised her disappeared in a single sentence. She had sacrificed her marriage for a man who had already been planning his own escape. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she understood exactly how alone she really was. Logan Pierce was arrested before noon. By sunset, every major business news network carried the story. The investigation uncovered years of bribery, bid rigging, money laundering, and corporate espionage involving several development firms across the country. His accounts were frozen. His companies were raided. His name disappeared from every board where he had once been celebrated. Ironically, the man who believed he could buy every outcome couldn't purchase one more day of freedom. Emily called me that evening. For the first time in months, her voice carried no confidence. Only exhaustion. Can we talk? I agreed. Not because I wanted answers, because I wanted closure. We met inside the same park where we had celebrated our first wedding anniversary. Winter had stripped the trees bare. The benches looked older than I remembered. Emily walked toward me slowly. She looked nothing like the woman who had smiled across the restaurant weeks earlier. Her eyes were swollen. Her shoulders slumped beneath a heavy coat. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. I'm sorry. The words hung between us. I waited. She continued. I kept telling myself I wasn't hurting you. I convinced myself we had already grown apart. Then Logan started promising a different life. He said everything would be easier. He said you cared more about your business than me. She lowered her head. I wanted to believe him. I listened quietly, not because her explanation erased anything, because anger had already left me. Only disappointment remained. I betrayed you long before the affair, she whispered. It started the first time I chose to hide the truth. She was right. Every betrayal begins with one small lie. The larger ones simply follow. Emily slowly reached inside her handbag and removed a sealed envelope. I want you to have this. Inside were printed emails, private messages, financial records. Every conversation she had shared with Logan during the conspiracy. She had voluntarily given everything to federal investigators earlier that morning. She looked at me again. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve it. I just couldn't keep protecting someone who destroyed both of us. I carefully placed the documents back inside the envelope. The investigation will decide what happens to Logan. She nodded. I know. Then tears rolled down her face. The baby. Her voice cracked. I honestly believed Logan was the father. The independent prenatal DNA results had arrived only hours before our meeting. They confirmed exactly what everyone feared. I wasn't the father. Logan Pierce was. Emily closed her eyes. He refuses to acknowledge the child. He won't answer my lawyer. He won't answer anyone. The man she had trusted had abandoned her the moment his own future collapsed. For several seconds, all I saw was a frightened woman facing the consequences of her own choices. Not an enemy. Not the wife I once knew. Just someone whose decisions had finally caught up with her. She looked at me one last time. Do you hate me? I thought carefully before answering. No. I hate what happened. I hate the lies. I hate the person we became. But hatred would only keep me connected to the worst chapter of my life. She cried even harder. I would give anything to change it. I know. But some decisions don't come with second chances. The divorce became final 3 months later. Emily accepted responsibility for the financial damages caused by leaking confidential company information. She cooperated fully with investigators. The court considered that cooperation during sentencing. She lost almost everything she had tried to protect. Not because I sought revenge. Because actions eventually collect their own debt. As I walked out of the courthouse for the final time, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. For months, I believed winning meant exposing every lie. I had been wrong. Winning meant waking up without anger, without fear, without wondering whether the person beside me was telling the truth. Some people think strength is found in getting even. I learned that real strength begins the moment you stop allowing betrayal to define the rest of your life. I got into my car, looked once at the courthouse behind me, and drove away without checking the rearview mirror. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't leaving something valuable behind. I was finally moving toward a future that belonged entirely to me. 2 years have passed since I walked out of that courthouse. Today, when people see my life, they usually assume success came from winning a legal battle. They're wrong. The greatest victory wasn't rebuilding my company. It wasn't signing new development projects or seeing our buildings reshape city skylines. It wasn't the financial recovery that followed after clients learned the truth. The greatest victory was becoming someone betrayal could no longer control. Our company grew steadily because we refused to compromise our values. Developers who once doubted us returned. New investors arrived, not because of sympathy, but because they trusted our integrity. Many of the employees who stayed during our darkest days are still with me today. Every year, we celebrate another completed project together. Those moments remind me that loyalty can survive, even when love doesn't. People occasionally ask whether I ever heard from Emily again. The answer is yes. About a year after everything ended, she wrote me a letter. She apologized once more. She said she had finally stopped blaming everyone else for the choices she made. She also thanked me for never trying to destroy her publicly, even when I had every opportunity. I never replied. Not because I hated her. Because some chapters don't need another sentence. They simply need to end. Sometimes I drive past the old restaurant where she first told me she was pregnant. I no longer feel anger. I simply remember how easily trust can disappear when honesty leaves first. That painful season taught me something I will carry for the rest of my life. Love without honesty cannot survive. Success without integrity never lasts. And peace begins the moment you stop chasing revenge and start protecting your own future. If someone betrays your trust, don't let bitterness become your identity. Walk away with your dignity. Build again. Live well. One day, you'll realize the life waiting ahead is greater than the one you were trying so desperately to save.